The last winter Elliot sat in his dimly lit living room, staring out the frost-covered window. Snow blanketed the world outside, a pristine white sheet that seemed both beautiful and suffocating. His body, frail and worn from months of chemotherapy, felt as fragile as the icicles hanging precariously from the eaves. The cancer had taken much from him, his strength, his appetite, and now his time. The doctors had given him only weeks to live. Elliot had lived his 67 years as a pragmatist. An engineer by trade, he trusted in science and reason. He built bridges, solved complex equations, and dismissed religion as wishful thinking. Life was a series of formulas and facts. Death was simply the end, a void to which all returned. He had no use for the idea of God or an afterlife. But now, as the ticking of the clock grew louder, the certainty he once felt began to waver. One evening, as the snowstorm howled outside, there came a knock at the door. Elliot hesitated. He rarely had visitors these days. Most friends had drifted away, uncomfortable with the looming shadow of his mortality. When he opened the door, he found his neighbour, Grace, bundled in a thick coat, her breath visible in the icy air. "I thought you could use some company," she said, holding up a thermos of hot cocoa. Grace was a devout Christian, the kind of person Elliot had always avoided. Yet there was something disarming about her, a quiet confidence, a warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold world outside. Elliot grunted but stepped aside, letting her in. She set the cocoa on the table and took a seat, her eyes scanning the room. "You've got a beautiful view here," she said, nodding toward the window. "Doesn't mean much when you're stuck inside," Elliot replied. Grace chuckled softly, unoffended. "True, but sometimes beauty is worth noticing, even if it's fleeting." Over the next hour, they talked about everything and nothing: his career, her work at the local church, the snowstorm outside. Grace didn't preach or push her faith, but Elliot could sense the undercurrent of her beliefs in the way she spoke about hope and purpose. Finally, he couldn't hold back his skepticism. "You talk a lot about hope, Grace, but let's be honest, there's no hope for me. The cancer's going to win. It's just science." Grace looked at him, her expression gentle but firm. "Science tells us the how, Elliot. Faith helps us wrestle with the why." He scoffed. "The why doesn't matter when you're dying." "Maybe it matters most then," she said softly. "You don't have to believe, Elliot, but what if you let yourself wonder, just for a moment? What if there's more than what we can see or measure?" The letter. After Grace left that night, Elliot couldn't stop thinking about her words. He found himself reaching for an old journal he hadn't touched in years. He began writing, not to anyone in particular, but simply to give shape to the thoughts swirling in his mind. "I don't believe in God," he wrote, "but I envy those who do. They seem to face death with a kind of peace I can't understand. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something or someone waiting on the other side. But I don't know how to ask, and I'm not even sure I want to." A final choice. In the days that followed, Grace continued to visit. She never pressed him to pray or convert, but simply sat with him, a quiet presence in the face of his growing weakness. One evening, as his body faltered further, Elliot found himself staring out at the snow once more. "I'm scared," he admitted to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not of dying, but of what comes after, or what doesn't." Grace took his hand, her eyes filled with compassion. "It's okay to be scared, but you don't have to face it alone. If you ever want to talk to God, He's listening, even now." Elliot didn't respond, but as the days passed, he began to wonder more earnestly. One night, when the house was silent and the snow outside glowed under the moonlight, he whispered into the stillness, "If you're there, I don't know what to say, but I hope you understand." Elliot passed away quietly a week later. Grace found his journal on the nightstand, the final page bearing a single line. Maybe faith isn't about certainty, but about opening the door to possibility. Though Elliot had never explicitly given his life to Jesus, in his final days, he had opened his heart to something greater than himself. For the record, Elliot died without Christ, but you don't have to. This is a message from Fusion Power, your one-stop solution. Subscribe to this channel and hit that bell. And show me some love by giving me a thumbs up.